On this episode of China Uncensored, 25 years later, what's the legacy of Tiananmen Square? Hi, welcome to China Uncensored. I'm your host, Chris Chappell. Today is the anniversary of an incident. Yes, that's right. At some point today, in the past, an incident occurred. Incidentally, let's not talk about that incident. It's just an incident after all. But if you absolutely must talk about this incident, get the facts straight. Some people will make the groundless claim that on June 4th, 1989, there was some kind of massacre in Tiananmen Square. It was just an incident. Okay, so the Chinese Communist Party has had a hard time coming to grips with all the murder. Well, I suppose that's really not how it should be put. More like they don't want anyone else in China to come to grips with how many people they killed. There's a reason why they stifle any mention of the June 4th incident and never released an official death toll, and potentially burned the bodies of students massacred. That's because the truth might interfere with the official line that the protesters were actually criminal elements and counter-revolutionaries attacking and killing police and soldiers who, to protect China, had to fire back in defense. So, what really happened? Well, the thing to remember is the protesters didn't start out as protesters. They began as mourners following the death of this man on April 15, 1989. Hu Yaobang had been one of the most powerful men in China until he was forced to resign as general secretary for supporting political reforms that alienated a lot of the hardliners in the party. But that didn't affect his popularity with the masses, and so his death began to trigger small demonstrations and protests around Beijing. On the day of his funeral, 100,000 people turned up in Tiananmen Square to participate, even though it was supposed to be closed to the public. Only after the funeral, they didn't leave. They began to call for the continuation of Hu's legacy of reforms, and at some point in late April 1989, party leaders began to realize that the peaceful protesters weren't just mourners. This was something new. I'm simplifying things a bit because there was a huge power struggle going on at the time, but party hardliners were concerned that any acknowledgement of the protesters would weaken the party. On April 26, state-run People's Daily released an editorial called "It is necessary to take a clear-cut stand against disturbances." It was the brainchild of a secret, high-level meeting within the party just days before, and it made one thing very clear: negotiation wasn't an option. There's a little word that keeps popping up in China ever since the Communist Party seized power: douzheng. The English translation is struggle, but it means so much more. Douzheng is what good party members should do against enemies of the party, whoever that might be, and it really could have been anyone. In the beginning, it was the landlords that had to be douzhenged. Then it was intellectuals, rightists, counter-revolutionaries. The Cultural Revolution saw struggle sessions where people were paraded in front of mobs and publicly criticized. Yeah, criticized is one of those words that means something a little different to the Communist Party. In the beginning of the 21st century, the party decided it must douzheng against Falun Gong. Most recently, it's been the public opinion struggle that has seen a clampdown on the internet and the targeting of commentators and activists. When the party uses douzheng, it's like a loyalty test. You're with the party or you're with them. And that's a warning as well. It says whatever group is being douzhenged, that's where the bomb's about to go off. So stand back. So when that People's Daily editorial used douzheng 4 times, ending with a call for everyone in China to douzheng to resolutely and swiftly halt this turmoil, the mourners turned protesters became enemies of the party. And that's one reason why, when the decision was made to clear Tiananmen Square, they didn't use batons and tear gas, they used tanks and machine gun fire. The party wanted to make sure that this kind of protest would never happen again. That stripped the mask off the party for a lot of people back then. There was no more hiding behind pretty propaganda slogans anymore. The truth was clear to everyone dodging bullets that day. The party doesn't care about you. The party cares about the party. And so a generation was kept in line by the constant fear of forced left hanging over their heads. As for the next generation, they would be better educated. Deng Xiaoping, the man in charge at the time, forced university students to denounce the protesters and confess any thoughts they had that might not be in line with the party. But that was just the beginning. In textbooks, media, museums, all began a state-mandated push to drill into people's head that China and the Communist Party was one and the same, that to love the party is to love China, and if you're against it, you're against China. And that's why when I criticize the party, there are people who say I'm anti-Chinese. Here's the other part of it, the economic miracle of China. You can get as rich as you want as long as you keep your head down and never question the way things are. Only it was less of a miracle and more of a nightmare. Over 1 billion people, virtually unfree in every aspect of their lives, were given one avenue of independence for all their energies, making money. And some got rich. Many others worked in dangerous conditions with long hours, low pay, no unions, in many cases not even legal status in the cities they worked, all with no freedom of the press, no rule of law, and no independent courts to seek justice when things went wrong. And they did go wrong. So with hundreds of millions working as little more than slave labor to turn China into the world's manufacturer, is it really a miracle how much the economy grew, especially since it was growing from pretty much zero? Meanwhile, a massive internal security apparatus, a fleet of censors, and a ban on social media like Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and a tight grip on Weibo ensures that no one is even able to step out of line. It's hard to even realize that something's wrong. And if the occasional person does start to question things, they're dealt with individually and quietly. So another Tiananmen never happens again. The legacy of the Tiananmen Square Massacre is a stick and carrot constantly hanging over China. Earlier this week, prominent human rights activist Hu Jia, who was part of the protests in 1989, suggested that what China needs is another Tiananmen Square. Millions back out on the street. But then again, it doesn't really seem like the party's changed all that much in the past 30 years. So what do you think? Leave your comments below, subscribe, and spread the word. Thanks for watching China Uncensored. I'm Chris Chappell. See you next time.